restaurant on West 126th Street. Harlem, the kind with chip plates, low lights, and no menu prices posted because the regular's already. No, a man named Eddie Caruso sits alone at table 7, halfway through a pork chop, 32 years old, Italian, a numbers runner who recently decided he wanted to stop running and start deciding. That decision is why he's sweating through his collar. Across the room, Bumpy Johnson sits perfectly still, watching him eat. Here's the incident, plain and early, no mystery about it. 3 nights early, Eddie stole $12,000 from a Harlem numbers drop and tried to sell the route to a downtown crew. He thought distance would protect him. It didn't. The money vanished by morning. The beer vanished. By noon, and by dinner time, Eddie received a message, sit down, finish your meal. That message is why it is here. That message is why he's not running, because running would mean his wife, Maria, and their 6-year-old son wouldn't make it. Through the week, Ed lifts his fork with a hand that won't stop shaking. The pork chop has gone cold. He chews anyway because stopping would look like defiance, and defiance is not an option. The waiter doesn't ask if everything's all right. Nobody in this room does. Bumpy doesn't speak, not yet. He lets the room breathe, lets Ed whiff. In his chewing, lets him swallow, lets the seconds stretch just long enough to hurt. This is not mercy, this is calculation. Ed knows the rule. If Bumpy lets you eat, it means the decision has already been made. You're just being allowed dignity. Before the bill comes due, a man in a gray coat moves to the door. Another shifts near the kitchen. The exits are sealed without anyone saying a word. Eddie's mouth goes dry. He tries to remember. When he crossed the line, maybe it was the moment he told himself he deserved more. Or when he convinced Maria that one last deal would set them free. Or when he believed Harlem would forgive him for choosing money over loyalty. Bumpy finally stands. The chair legs scrape once, loud. Final, he walks toward table 7 slow enough that Eddie can count. Each step, 8 steps, 7, 6. When Bumpy stops, he doesn't threaten. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't reach for a weapon. He asks one question. Is it good? And a no. DS to fast. A mistake. Yes, sir. Bumpy looks at the plate. Untouched sides, half-eaten meat. He notices everything. Finish it, he says, and it does. Every bite, every chew feels like borrowed time. When the plate is empty, Bumpy leans in close enough that Eddie can smell tobacco and winter air. You stole from me, Bumpy says calmly. And you lied about why. Eddie opens his mouth to be. E.g., Bumpy lifts a finger. Silence. Then comes the part Eddie didn't expect. You're not dying tonight, Bumpy says. Relief hits first, then confusion, then fear, because relief doesn't come free. Bumpy's dry. Gittens looks around the room, but someone else might. He adds, and as Eddie turns toward the door, realizing who just walked in, the question becomes unavoidable. Who is Bumpy really here for, and what does he want Eddie to choose? The man who just walked through the door is named Frankie Rousseau. Eddie knows him instantly. Everyone does. Frankie is 28, sharp suit, clean shoes, and a smile that never reaches his eyes. He's been courting Eddie for weeks. Quiet meetings, careful promises, talk of protection, and bigger percentages. Frankie is the reason Eddie believed the theft would work. Fr. Enki is also the reason Eddie's heart drops straight into his stomach. Frankie pauses just inside the doorway, sensing the shift in the room before he understands it. The conversations die. Ira stop moving. Even the kitchen noise dulls as if the walls themselves are listening. He spots Ed at table 7, smiles. Ed, Frankie says, lifting a hand in greeting. You look like hell, Ed. Di doesn't answer. He can't. His tongue feels thick. His eyes flick once, just once toward Bumpy. Frankie follows the glance. The smile fades. Frankie Rousseau is brave in a very specific way. He's broad. That when he thinks the ground is solid. Brave when he believes the rules still apply. But the moment he sees Bumpy standing 3 feet from Eddie's chair, he understands something has gone terribly wrong. Frankie's first instinct is to leave. The man at the door closes it behind him. Soft, final. Frankie turns back slowly, palms open. Evening, he says, voice steady but thinner now. Didn't realize this place was occupied. Bumpy doesn't look at him. He looks at Etta. This is the man you trusted. Bumpy asks. Etta swallows. His wife's face flashes in his mind. Maria at the sink, sleeves rolled up, pretending not to. Worrying, his son Tony asleep with the radio low, believing his father always comes home. Eddie has a choice now, and he knows it. If he lies, Frankie. He walks if he tells the truth. Frankie doesn't. Yes, Eddie says. His voice cracks and steadies. He's the one. Frankie's jaw tightens. Edit, he says carefully. You want to think real hard before. Bumpy raises a hand. Frankie stops mid-sentence. Shocked that he actually did. That money, Bumpy says, didn't just disappear. It went somewhere. Frankie exhales through his nose. I don't know what. You've been told. You told him. Bumpy interrupts. Still calm, you told him he'd be safe. You told him his family wouldn't be touched. You told him distance meant something. Bumpy finally turns and looks at Frankie, and you knew it didn't. Frankie's eyes flick around the room. He counts men. He calculates angles. He realizes there will be no sudden heroics tonight. This doesn't have to. End badly, Frankie says, for anyone. Ed almost laughs. Almost. Bumpy steps back, creating space, not retreating, allowing Ed. Bumpy says, you wanted out. You wanted money instead of fear. I understand that. Ed looks up. Startled, that acknowledgement cuts deeper than anger. But here's the truth. Bumpy continues. You don't get to choose who pays for that want. Frankie, he takes a step forward. Listen to me. He says to Eder, whatever he's offering you, it won't be enough. You think this ends with you walking out. Bumpy smiles faintly once. Oh, he's walking out. Bumpy says. Frankie's head snaps toward him. And what's this about? Bumpy's answer is quiet. Debt. He looks at Eddie again. You owe me $12,000. Bumpy says, and you, Don. Have it. Eddie shakes his head. No, sir, but Frankie does. Bumpy replies. Silence crashes down. Heavy, crushing, Frankie's face hardens. You're asking him to, I'm asking him to live. Bumpy says, and I'm asking you to choose whether he does. Eddie turns too. Frankie, eyes pleading, ashamed, terrified. Frankie looks back, and for the first time, Eddie sees calculation where friendship used to be. So the question sharpens, unavoidable now. Will Frankie save Eddie or sacrifice him to protect himself? Frankie doesn't answer right away. That silence tells Ed everything Frankie Rousseau has. Always been quick with words, jokes, promises, reassurances delivered like contracts already signed. Now his mouth opens, closes, opens again. He's measuring the cost, not the money, the risk. 12,000, Frankie repeats, almost amused. You're talking like that's sitting in my coat pocket. Bumpy doesn't react. He gestures once. A man near the bar places a small leather ledger on the table beside Eddie's empty plate. It lands with a soft thud that sounds louder than it should. Your handwriting, Bumpy says. Your roots, your percentages, your cut. Fran. Kai recognizes it immediately. His face tightens despite himself. You've been keeping records on me. Frankie asks. I keep records on everyone who thinks they're invisible. Bumpy replies. Eddie Starr. At the ledger. He's seen pages like this before. Numbers that look harmless until they decide someone's future. He realizes now that the trap wasn't the theft. It was the belief that nobody was W. Atching, Frankie straightens his jacket. So, what's the play here? He asks. You shake me down. I walk out lighter. Eddie goes free. And we all pretend this never happened. Bumpy shakes his head once, slow. No pretending, he says. You're going to pay the debt. Frankie exhales sharply. And if I don't, Bumpy turns to Ed. Then Ed doesn't leave this room. Eddie's chest tightens. His pulse thuds in his ears. He thinks of Maria again. What she say when he doesn't come home? What she say when men show up asking questions she can't answer? Fr. Anki sees it. The fear, the leverage, you see. Frankie says softly, spreading his hands. This is what he does. He turns us on each other. Bumpy doesn't deny it. Edit, Frankie continues. Boy it. Elo, intimate. Like they're alone. You think giving. Him my money saves you. You think that ends this. He'll own you every week, every breath. Ed knows that might be true, but the alterna. Tiv is immediate. What do you want me to do? Eddie asks barely above a whisper. Bumpy answers before Frankie can. You're going to stand up. Bumpy says you're going to walk out that door. And tomorrow morning you're going back to work. Same route, same streets. Eddie blinks. I thought you said the debt gets paid. Bumpy says, that's between me and Frankie. Frankie laughs sh. Art and humorless. You expect me to just hand over 12 grand because you say so. Bumpy finally lets something hard into his voice. Not loud, just unmistakable. I expect you to decide how valuable Eddie S life is to you. Frankie's eyes flick to the door. Again, then to the men inside, then to Eder. Eder sees the truth forming. Frankie could try something desperate. A gun, a shout, a dash for the exit. But he doesn't, because Frankie's problem isn't courage, it's loyalty. Eder, Frankie says slowly. You put me in this. Eder flinches. You told me. I told you what you needed to hear. Frankie snaps, then catches himself, smooths his tone. And now you want me to clean it up. Bumpy steps back again, granting space, granting time. The most dangerous gift. 5 minutes, Bumpy says, Yo, you to talk. He turns away. The room breathes again. But it's a shallow breath. Frankie leans close to Eddie, voice urgent now. Listen to me. If I pay this, I'm exposed. That ledger, it won. T disappear. He'll bleed me dry. Eddie's eyes fill. If you don't, I die. Frankie hesitates. Then he says the words Eddie feared most. There might be another way. Eddie looks up. Hope and dread call. Lighting. What way? He asks. Frankie glances toward the kitchen, toward the back corridor, toward places Eddie never noticed before. If something happened, Frankie says carefully, right now, Eddie. He recoils. You want me to think. Frankie hisses. One move, one distraction, and this all changes. Eddie looks at Bumpy's back, calm, still, and the danger rises to a new level because Eddie realizes the truth. Frankie isn't choosing between money and loyalty, he's choosing between sacrifice and survival. So the question sharpens, dangerous and immediate. Will Eddie follow Frankie into something irreversible or turn on the only man who might let him live? Frankie waits for Eddie to answer. The room hums with quiet danger. The clink of a glass somewhere behind them, the low hiss of the stove in the kitchen, the scrape of a chair. Leg shifting an inch to far, Eddie looks at Frankie and sees something he's never noticed before. Not confidence, urgency. Frankie isn't offering a plan. He's searching for permission. What are you talking about? Eddie asks, stalling. Frankie leans closer, breath hot against Eddie's ear. The kitchen corridor, he murmurs. There's a service exit. 2 steps past the prep sink. You knock over a tray. They look. I move. Eddie pulls back. Move. How? Frankie doesn't answer immediately. His eyes flick once toward H. His coat pocket. Just once. Eddie understands a gun. The idea hits him like ice water. Eddie has carried money, not weapons. He's run numbers, not blood. His hands start shaking again. Worse the and before, you said nobody had to get hurt. Eddie whispers. Frankie's mouth tightens. I said what you needed to hear. Across the room, Bumpy stands with his back turned, still seemingly uninterested, as if the outcome doesn't matter. That's what scares Eddie the most, because men who don't need to watch usually already know how it ends. I can't, Eddie says, I can't do tea. Ha. Frankie's voice hardens. Then you're dead. The words land clean. No anger, no drama. Frankie straightens and takes a step away toward the kitchen corridor, and that's when Bumpy speaks with ew. T turning around. Frankie, he says calmly, you want to keep that hand where I can see it. Frankie freezes. Slowly, he turns his head. Bumpy is watching him now. Funny thing, Bumpy continues. You think you're the first man who's tried to solve a problem with noise? Frankie forces a smile. You think I'm reaching? Bumpy nods once. I know you are. Frankie makes a decision fast. He lying. Not toward Bumpy, but toward Eddie. His hand yanks Eddie up out of the chair, arm locked around his neck. Eddie gasps as the world tilts. The gun flashes in Frankie's other hand. Shouts erupt. Chairs scrape. Someone moves too fast and gets slammed back into place. Frankie presses the gun against Eddie's jaw. No body moves. He snarls, or he dies first. Eddie's vision blurs. His heart slams so hard he thinks it might break his ribs. From the inside, this wasn't the deal, Eddie chokes. Frankie's voice shakes now. This is the only deal left. Bumpy doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't rush. He doesn't draw a weapon. He takes one step closer. You already lost, Bumpy says quietly. Frankie laughs sharp and panicked. You're unarmed. Bumpy tilts his head. Am I? Fraw. And Key squeezes the trigger. Nothing happens. A hollow click. Loud. Final, the gun doesn't fire. Frankie stares at it, confused, horrified. He squeezes again. Click. The room moves all along. Someone hits Frankie from the side, and it drops. Coughing, clawing for air, the gun skitters across the floor, kicked away before Frankie can reach it. Frankie is on his knees now, hands forced. Behind him, disbelief plastered across his face. Bumpy steps forward and looks down at him. You bought that gun 3 weeks ago, Bumpy says. Same man who offered you the route. Frankie's eyes wide. Then the bullets, Bumpy continues, were never bullets. The realization crashed over Frankie in waves. The plan, the confidence, the escape. All built on something that never existed. You knew, Frankie whispers. Bumpy nods. Before Eddie ever touched that. Money, he turns to Eddie who is still on the floor, chest heaving. I told you, Bumpy says, not unkindly, you don't get to choose who pays. Fr. Enki starts to speak, desperation flooding his voice. Listen, this doesn't have to. Bumpy raises a hand. Frankie falls silent. Here's the twist you didn't see. Bumpy says, there was never a chill. Ice between money and life. He gestures toward Eddie. There was a choice between truth and betrayal. Bumpy looks at Eddie now, and you told the truth. Eddie shakes his head, confused. I almost, but you didn't. Bumpy says, that's what matters. Bumpy turns back to Frankie. You, he says, would have killed a man to save yourself. Frankie's shoulders slump. The fight drains out of him all. At once, Bumpy nods to his men. They lift Frankie too. His feet. Eddie struggles up, voice breaking. You said someone else might. Bumpy meets his eyes. Yes, he says, and now you know who. As Frankie is dragged toward the back, he twists, eyes wild, and locks onto Eddie. You think this is over, Frankie spits. You think you walk away clean. The door swings open, and before it closes, Frankie shouts one last thing that chills Eddie to the bone. You don't know what you just agreed to. The door slams, silence returns, thick, heavy, irreversible. Bumpy looks at Eddie one final time. Go home, he says. Hug your family. Eddie nods, barely able to stand. But as he steps toward the exit, One terrible question settles in his chest. If Frankie was never the real danger, what did? Ed had just become part of. Now Ed steps out into the cold night air and almost collapses. His legs feel borrowed. His breath comes in shallow bursts like his body hasn't accepted yet that it's all. Low to keep going. Behind him, the restaurant door stays closed. No shouting, no gunfire, no spectacle. That silence is the first consequence. Eddie walks. He doesn't run. Running would draw attention. Running would look like fear. He keeps his head down and moves through streets he's known his whole life. Now, feeling unfamiliar, as if they're watching him back, when he reaches his apartment. Auntie Maria is waiting. She's still dressed, coat on. A hair undone, she's been sitting in the dark, listening for footsteps. The moment Ed closes the door, she knows. She doesn't ask questions. She doesn't cry. She wraps her arms around him and holds on like she's afraid he'll disappear again if she lets go. Ed breaks then, not loudly, not dramatically. He presses his face into our shoulder, and lets the shaking come. I messed up. He whispers. Maria doesn't respond. She just holds him tighter. That night, Ed doesn't sleep. Every sound outside feels deliberate. Every shadow low. Acts like a man standing still. Morning comes. Anyway, and with it the second consequence. Ed goes back to work. Same streets, same route, same corners. But something is different now. Pete. They'll look at him longer, not with admiration, not with fear, with curiosity. They know he sat at table 7. They know he walked out. And they know Frankie Russo did not. Nobody says it out they don't have to. By noon, Ed understands the cost of survival. He's alive, but he's marked. Men who used to joke with him keep their distance. Men who once ignored him now watch him close. Every envelope he collects feels heavier, not because of the money, but because of what it represents. At home, Maria senses it, too. You're different, she says quietly, that evening. Ed nods. I don't think it goes away. She looks at their son playing on the floor, unaware. Safe for now. Does it ever? Ed doesn't answer. That night, a knock comes at the door. Eddie's heart jumps into his throat. He opens it slowly. A man he's never seen before stands there, polite, professional, no threats. Mr. Caruso, the man says, you're expected tomorrow morning, 8:00 a.m. Ed swallows. Where? The man gives him an address, not the restaurant. Something official, something permanent. The man turns to leave, then pauses. Oh, he adds, Frankie won't be bothering you anymore. Eddie closes the door and leans against it, breath shallow again. He's alive. His family is safe. But he finally understands the trade he made. He didn't just survive a night. He inherited a future, and the question that won't let him rest is simple and brutal. What does it cost to keep living when walking away is no longer an option? By the end of the week, the streets have adjusted. They always do. Frankie Russo's name stops circulating first. Not all at once, not dramatically, it just fades. Conversations change direction when it comes up. Jokes trail off. The absence become as louder than any rumor. People understand what silence means. Ed feels it everywhere. Numbers runners stop cutting corners. Couriers show up early instead of late. Debts that used to drag for weeks get settled in days. Nobody explains why. Nobody needs to. One night, Ed passes the restaurant on West 126th Street. The windows are lit, tables full, laughter spilling out like no thing ever happened. Table 7 is occupied by a couple, sharing dessert, unaware of what that spot remembers. Ed doesn't slow down because he knows now. Places forget faster than people. At 8 o'clock sharp, RP the next morning, Ed stands outside the address. He was given a narrow office above a tailor shop. No sign on the door, no name. Inside, a man sits behind a desk with papers already laid out. At Eddie's papers, routes, schedules, adjusted percentages. You're being moved, the man says without looking up. Different neighborhoods, fewer eyes, more responsibility. Eddie hesitates. I didn't ask for TH. E-man finally looks at him. Nobody does. He slides one page forward. Eddie's name is printed at the top. This keeps your family insulated. The man continues, but insulation isn't the S. Alma's distance, remember that. It assigns. That's the third consequence. He isn't just surviving anymore. He's inside. The street reacts accordingly. Some people avoid him completely. Others lean in, trying to read him, trying to figure out how close he is to the center. Now Etta says little. He's learned that words travel faster than feet. At home, Maria notices a change in money first. It's steadier, cleaner, no sudden shortages. No frantic counting at the table, but she also notices the way Etta checks the locks twice. The way he listens before answering the door. The way he watches their son lifetime is something that can be taken. You saved us, she says one night. Etta doesn't correct her. Across Harlem, the adjustment completes itself. A new hierarchy settle. Essen without announcements or speeches. People who flirted with shortcuts rethink them. Men who thought distance meant safety stop believing that Frankie's disappearance becomes a reference point, not a warning told loudly, a lesson absorbed quietly. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Eddie realizes something that scares him more than fear ever did. He's no longer reacting. He's adapting, and that realization leads to one final unsettling question. When survival reshapes you this completely, what part of yourself doesn't make it through? 6 months later, Eddie Caruso eats dinner at home every night. Same table, same chair, same routine. Maria serves. Their son talks about school. The radio hums softly in the background. From the outside, it looks like AM. And who got what he wanted? Stability. But Eddie no longer finishes his meals. He eats halfway, then stops, fork resting on the plate. Eyes drifting not to memories but to calculations. Who spoke too long today? Who avoided his eyes? Who paid early? One evening, Maria notices. You never finish anymore, she says gently. Eddie forces a smile. Not hungry. That's the lie, the true. TH is simpler. He learns something at table 7 that never left him. Eating is a luxury reserved for people who don't have to listen. Weeks later, Eddie passes a young runner outside the same rest, Orient on 126th Street. Nervous kid, shaky hands. Too eager, the kid nods respectfully and moves aside without being told. Eddie stops. For a moment, he considers warning him, telling him to stay. Small, stay honest, stay out. Instead, Eddie says nothing. He keeps walking. That's the final cost. Not the fear, not the work, not even the knowledge. It's the silence where a W. Arning should have been. Bumpy Johnson let him finish his meal, and in return, Eddie learned how to let other people starve. Without lifting a hand, if you want the next story where survival comes with a price no one talks about, stay here. Because some dinners never end. They just move to a different